Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for part one of a two-part masterclass called How to Grow by Tearing Down the Vendor-Customer Wall. Today, we're going to hear from Bob London, who is a phenomenal person, good friend, CONNECTpreneur head coach, and a CEO of Chief Listening Officers. Bob is also a former chief marketing officer of a number of public and privately held technology companies. He's one of the best marketing minds I know. And before we turn it over to Bob, I do want to make a couple of quick announcements. Part two will be next Tuesday, same time, 11:30 Eastern, next Tuesday. And Skylar will put the link in if you want to register for that. This will be recorded and edited and put on our YouTube channel. This also is an invitation-only program. We allow our alumni like yourselves and special guests to join. It's sort of a way for us to stay in touch with our CONNECTpreneur community and add value to all of you great guys. Many of you know Bob because Bob prepped you. Bob has prepped dozens of successful CONNECTpreneur presenting companies, including many of you on the call. And I'm just totally thrilled to have Bob involved. Bob will do a presentation and then we'll go into a Q&A session. We will respect your time and be done at the appointed hour, 12:30. So we'll do 1 hour. And we will continue the dialogue on the Slack channel. If you guys want to join the Masterclass Slack channel or the alumni channel, and Bob is on there so you can keep the dialogue going throughout. But without further ado, let me turn it over to my good friend and CONNECTpreneur head coach, Bob London. Bob, thank you so much for joining us and for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Tien. Thank you very much. And I'm always admiring how much, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, sort of how you're always adding value to your audience. And this is a great example. And I appreciate being a part of it. And we were just talking offline, the three of us, that Skylar, you deserve a lot of kudos for putting up with Tien, but also, or keeping up and putting up, but also for putting on, like, just hitting the ground running and doing so many great things for the community. So thanks. So it's great to be here. And I hope that you will use the chat function to ask questions when you have them. I'm not going to be able to get to everything as we go through, and then we have some dedicated Q&A time. But a lot of stuff that I will talk about, it's going to stimulate some questions and reactions, and it always does. And I don't think this should be any different. So, this concept that it's a premise that I've developed, and I don't think everyone's going to love this. I'll just say that, a little controversial statement there. Why? Because we have, and I'm including myself in this as well, we have so many concepts and behaviors that are ingrained, intrinsic, unconscious as business owners, as executives, as CEOs, or just as business people in general. And I am going to challenge some of those today. So I hope you're ready to be challenged. And this is not I wish it wasn't a one-way, one-to-many. I wish we could do back and forth and talk, but I'm not sure that's the forum for today. So I'm going to challenge you guys. And my premise is based on my career, but also my work as a consultant, including more than just about 2,400 one-on-one decision maker interviews. So these are basically my clients, customers that I have conversations with to understand their world. There is a huge wall. This is the premise, but there's a huge imaginary wall between the way we think as vendors and the way our customers think. Okay. There's this sort of sense of guardrails that both parties have, and it's almost a formality type thing. There's certain things you're not supposed to say or ask, or sort of a third rail or guardrail type conversations that we just don't feel comfortable as vendors asking. And in the dance between vendors and customers, we vendors are leading that dance. We are the choreographers. And I think the problem is sometimes we over choreograph and over script our customer interactions. So my premise is, and my body of work shows that if we can just figure out how to get customers talking more and asking better questions and get to some truths and insights, that this wall will melt away and customers will share more than they've ever shared before, and prospects. And you'll be able to use this information right from the customer's voice to grow your company and to clarify the voice of your company. And that gets us to the topic of next week's follow-on masterclass. So today is about something I call uncovering the customer's elevator rant. But next week is how do we use what we learned from our customers to create a customer-first messaging strategy. So these two sessions are kind of a tandem. They go together. And I hope to see you next week. And even if you know someone who missed today, it's like, oh, I guess I shouldn't bother coming to the next one. That's okay. Those sessions can be viewed as standalones as well, equally effective. So what is the elevator rant? Bonus points to anyone who knows who this is. Feel free to throw it in the chat. Name of the movie, name of the person that you're seeing here. What is an elevator rant? An elevator rant is what customers, now could be, when I say customers, I'm referring to prospects as well. Customers and prospects talk about on the proverbial elevator when there are no vendors around. So, I'm not literally talking about the elevator because, especially in this day and age, not everyone's in the office. But it's anything that your target audience says to themselves or each other. It may be about you. It may be about their business. It may be about problems they're having with other departments. It could be anything. It's all stuff that they're thinking about and talking to each other about, or even thinking to themselves when we're not around. But it is the truth. The elevator rant is the truth. And it's in their words, not vendor speak. One exercise that I do in my workshops is I will get a leadership team around the table and I'll say, okay, write down how a customer would say, how would a customer describe the problem that you help them solve? And invariably, out of the 6 or 8 people in the room, 2/3 or 3/4 of them will start by saying, we have a multi-pronged global solution. No, I'm not asking for your elevator pitch. I'm asking for you to talk about the customer's words. How would they use it? Start with I am a customer. And it's hard to shapeshift and get into that mode, but that's where this whole wall thing comes from. We feel like we have to have our own language and our own sort of, as I refer to it, as vendor speak. So it's very important to understand the words customers use in real life, or IRL for the kids out there. And why do I need to know the elevator rant? And it's not us defining it. It's like an archaeological thing. You have to uncover it. Well, because when you understand the customer's elevator rant, the target audience's elevator rant, it makes marketing and selling easier. And I'm going to give you an example of that in just a moment. Why does it make marketing, selling easier? Because you're being more relevant. The things you're talking about are the things that are big priorities for the customer. And there's sort of this moment, where, well, aren't we just talking about general business, getting to know your customers? Yeah. But what I'm talking about is the fact that we don't spend enough time getting to know them, or we assume what our customers want, or our customers have changed, or our prospects or target audience have changed, or there's a new competitor. And then that elevator rant starts all over again. We have to keep learning it. So, and of course, to make marketing and selling easier is another way of saying getting more profitable growth. How do I uncover the elevator rant? This is the part that I almost feel silly saying it because it's so simple. You just have to ask better questions and listen. But you have to ask about them. So one thing to remember is your customers and prospects are not ever going to be experts, on your product. And they don't need to be. They don't need to be experts on your product. They are experts in their own pain points, their own priorities. That's what we should be asking them about. Ask about them. And then basically, and I literally mean this, put yourself on mute. because that will keep you from interrupting them when they're in the groove of talking about what's going on in their business. And even if you put yourself on mute and you accidentally start to talk while you're mute, that's okay. I think that in my experience, the customer or the prospect on the other end will say, oh, that's nice. They actually went on mute so they could hear me. So you're going to see some stats in a moment, but basically when it comes to average talk time, and I'll show you a study on this, even the best salespeople, so I'm talking about sales specifically, not customer success and not account management, the best salespeople still talk almost half the time. But in my conversations with my clients' customers, I only talk 25 to 35% of the time, which means, guess what? I get to listen more. So let me give you this quick example from some recent work I did for a client. It's a very simple, you notice it's not super short, but it's a very simple LinkedIn message that I sent out to executives in what is called the SFR industry. SFR is basically real estate investment trusts that own lots of single-family rental homes. SFR is single-family rental. And my client has a solution that will dramatically reduce operating costs. That's all I want to say, because it's companies in stealth mode. So there's this very straightforward thing. I say, please excuse the unsolicited message. I'll be brief. And I just talk about, and you'll see that, oh, there's buzzwords in here, AI and blah, 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 and, early alerts. But okay, so there's buzzwords in it. So what? I want to tell them some of the benefits of this thing. And I'm asking them, do you have 20 minutes to chat or point me in the right direction? So I sent this to some very, very senior C-1, so the C level and one level below that of some publicly traded companies. And it was really nice because I started to get notes like this. Hey, Bob, thanks for reaching out. I'd like to learn more. Best way to reach me is blah, blah, blah. Happy to chat. And this has turned into this response, which was several months ago, has turned into a huge opportunity for my client. So the key is that this guy reports to the CEO of a very successful, profitable public company, and he's in charge of all operations. So kind of hit the nail on the head. So with these messages, oh, sorry, I went too fast. Why is this successful? Because up here on the upper left, you'll see the term remote preventative maintenance. Now, again, those might seem like buzzwords to you. They may seem like just adjectives strung together with commas. But in this context, for this target audience, for this gentleman, those three words are incredibly important. They constitute his elevator rant. He's in charge of maintenance and operations for 90,000 single-family rental homes. So we understand that what he's trying to do is manage properties at scale and figure out where to apply his maintenance resources and how to find out, what's going on in a home, what that's affecting the tenant's habitability, et cetera. So it's a big deal. So, so I'm going to go a little further. We actually have engaged with, just from these LinkedIn messages, and all the crap we all get in our LinkedIn inbox, right? So it had to be something to cut through. The two biggest prospects in our target audience have responded and are in the process of discussing, a huge pilot program. They're both publicly traded companies. Their total market cap is $36 billion. One of them is the EVP of operations, and the other company, it's an SVP of operations. Both incredibly accomplished, wicked smart, but they are decision makers. They're not the only decision maker, but they are decision makers. So the power of having the right words that address the language the customers use, remote preventative maintenance. So how did we know those were the right words? How do we know those were the right words? We did some homework, basically. We did some open-ended conversations with folks who were in this target audience, not at this level, but more like director, VP level. And we did customer discovery. Excuse me. And we realized that these companies are growing so fast that they haven't had time to focus on they do very good maintenance of their existing portfolio properties, these single family homes, but they hadn't really gotten into using technology. And now that is starting. That process is starting. They're starting to look at technology. So we knew that we had a chance with a message like this of catching people, capturing that wave, that elevator rant. Okay. So this is the formula. Okay. And I'm going to tell you the questions in a minute that we used, but the unbelievable thing that I almost can't get over it. It's so stunning is that my client, do you even see a company name in here? A vendor name? Nope. The company is in stealth mode. My client is in stealth mode. My client has a one-page website that says nothing. It literally almost says nothing. It's just a contact page. So if you're this guy, let's call him Bill, and Bill gets a LinkedIn message, how compelling must the value proposition be in order to overcome the fact, or for him to overlook the fact that there's no company name? He certainly doesn't know who the company is. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know me at all. It's all completely cold. There's nothing special about this other than the fact that we nailed the value proposition. Why? We nailed it because we spent time talking to folks in this market who understand to understand what their needs were. And it's another expression used, like, what's on your whiteboard? What's on your whiteboard? That's a very simple question that we ask during customer discovery. Or what's going on at the board level? So let's look at some of those questions. This is just a sampling of what I call radically authentic customer discovery. What do you so these are questions that I actually ask of my clients' customers, or I coach my clients on how to ask them during their customer discovery or account management calls. So I'll ask, what do you think is the biggest priority or challenge that the board is? What's going on in the board meetings? What's their big thing? What are they wrestling with? And you'll also notice that my tone is very informal, conversational. It's not like I'm reading them a survey question, right? So it just so happened that the two folks that I mentioned on the previous page, the two executives, they have proximity to the board. One of them is in board meetings on a regular basis. The other one gets direct readouts from the board meeting and provides input to the board meeting. So they know what's going on in the board meeting. They know what the big priority is. Another question, what absolutely has to be off your whiteboard in the next 90 days? I'm going to skip down. If I gave you a magic wand, what problem would you make disappear first? So one of the things that you'll notice is these questions are distinctive. I'm going to guess that none of you has ever been asked any of these questions. Maybe the magic wand, maybe this one about what does your team need to get better at. But the questions have a certain distinctiveness, but also a little bit of a spark. So the magic wand one, I've noticed that people give a little bit of, they break down a little bit in a good way. They kind of go, oh, like that's cute. Or some of them, sometimes they'll even give a little laugh, which is part of breaking down that wall, right? It's part of the process of establishing a more human connection to get them to feel disarmed. And what's important about that, too, is that you're asking about them. You're asking about their problems, their board, their priorities, their challenges, their whiteboard. You don't go in and start saying, what do you think of our product? What do you think of our product? That is what creates that vendor customer wall in the first place. And customers are sort of like, and prospects are like, yeah, I know you're here to talk my ear off about your product. Instead, you start with these questions that really get to open up. Here's another really good one at the bottom. Hey, I'm sure your job description is probably a page long or 2 pages, single spaced. But in there, there's probably one thing, maybe 2 things that your company is absolutely counting on you to get done. And you know what that does to the person that I'm talking to? It makes them really think. It's like, you know what, you're right. I could never get everything done that's on my job description. But I know that there's one thing that if I don't get it done, there's going to be consequences, we'll just say. So this is kind of how it starts to come together, this radically authentic customer discovery, using that to understand the elevator rant, which is not a problem necessarily that your product solves. In other words, you're not trying to tee up an answer that you want. You're trying to get an answer that's going to help move your business forward. So, excuse me, here's this. I wish someone would run in here with some water. There's no one here. This is the stat I mentioned a few minutes ago. So there's a company called Gong, G-O-N-G. They actually do something pretty cool, which is they provide analytics. It's an analytics platform to help companies analyze recorded sales calls or customer success calls. So Gong analyzed 1 million recordings of sales calls. And they wanted to look at two things. What was the average talk time versus listen time? So listen's over here on the right. And then look at that by the performance of the reps in 3 different classifications: the lowest performing, the average, and the star. So I think this is terrible news, maybe because my job title is Chief Listening Officer. But on average, these are B2B sales reps. More than 2/3 of the time they're talking. And you guys have all been on the receiving end of pitches and sales conversations. It's almost like if they are listening, it's only to rebut or answer what you just said or sell you something. It's not really to hear you. And of course, the star reps are talking about half the time, a little less than half the time. So they get to do the most listening. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I don't record my calls by and large, but what would my comparable be? So that's me there enjoying myself on the bay. It turns out that I talk about 25 to 35% of the time, which means I get to listen a lot more of the time. So, and it's not really hard to do the math. If I ask a question, and you'll hear a clip a little while of me doing a live call. If I ask a question, it might take 15 or 20 seconds, and then the person will talk for 2 minutes. So that's what we want. And we just need to get them talking more. And again, that comes back to asking better questions. Feel free to throw your comments or questions in the chat, but just a quick reminder, and I will try to get to them as soon as I can. So let's go back to the wall. So what typically happens on our side, the vendor side of the wall, is, again, there's vendor speak. It's kind of this wishful thinking. We hope our message will land the right way. We do this throat clearing, which is ironic because I'm clearing my throat. Throat clearing is when you spend too much time with the setup, too much time talking about us, our corporate slides. It's a joke. People joke about it all the time, but no one seems to be learning that you have to do a better job of getting to the point. And on the customer side, they're sitting there going, they're looking at their watch and they're going, yeah, can't they just tell me what they're great at and how the product works? And Tien and I have talked about this when a company comes in and they say, here's our slide of capabilities, and there might be 30 bullet points of things that they can do. No. Tell me what you're better at than anyone else. Tell me what you're great at. That's where we need to start this conversation. So this is kind of a generalized rant. And then, of course, we, as vendors, we go, we thought that went pretty well. So can we set up a demo? Yeah, we'll let you know. We'll let you know. Thanks for your time. Appreciate that. And that's not good, right? That's not how we want this all to go. We want it to go differently. And I want to make this point here that vendors have the opportunity to choreograph these meetings almost 99% of the time. And so we own that wall. And we kind of put it there with all our vendor speak and our talking at them, so we can remove it or destroy it or crumble it. It's not always true. Sometimes you're going to get customers that do put up a wall. They do put up a front. But over and over again, if you ask the right questions in the right way, in the right context, you will bring down that wall enough to be able to see the customer's truth. So, for example, after a pitch, you come back and what do you do with your team? You say, well, let's debrief. I think it went pretty well. What do you guys think? And everyone's like, yeah, I thought it went well. And no one's maybe there's a critical voice in the room, maybe not. But but it's definitely an internal exercise. And my point is, for those kinds of things, the right answer is almost never in the conference room or the Zoom room, the internal Zoom room. So what you do instead is you go back to the prospect instead of guessing at how it went. And you say, and I've done this many times. Hey, really appreciate the time today, but what did you guys talk about right after the call ended? You could preface it by saying, let me just ask you a question. And you know what's amazing about it? People might be taken aback, but not in a bad way. They might feel like, whoa, that's kind of nervy. Well, guess what? It shows a little bit of confidence. It shows like this is a company that's going to be transparent. They want to know the truth. So the customer might say, and I've heard this many, many times, wow, no one's ever asked me that before. As a matter of fact, we did have some concerns. You want to hear, since you asked, you want to hear them. And that's how it goes. And so this is just one example of the type of question that I recommend you guys use. I've used it myself when I have a new client and I'm trying to get a sense. So we have the kickoff meeting. There's 6 or 8 people in the room. My direct client, the CEO, is there. I'm leading the meeting. I get feedback. I leave. Who knows, right? I mean, you could assume it went well. So I just email the client and say, hey, you have a few minutes? Sure. Well, what did you guys talk about right after I left? Oh, well, that's a good question because we did talk and generally things were great. We did have 2 questions. I'm like, oh, well, I can answer those right away. Great, thank you. So that's how we want to act and operate. It's a much more authentic, transparent way of doing things. So I did not do a whole lot of, again, throat clearing in the sense of doing a lot about me, but I think it's important to just talk about a couple things. What about Bob? I am a marketer, both as CMO of public and private companies, as Tien mentioned. But over the last several years, I've repositioned myself as something called a chief listening officer, which means I do a lot of the things that a marketing consultant should do well: positioning, value prop, brand messaging strategy, go to market. But in order to do those things, I have to talk to my clients' customers and I have to get them to open up, or I have to train my clients on how to get customers to open up. You would be maybe surprised, but definitely maybe horrified to find that a lot of these exercises that marketing firms get paid to do, positioning, value prop, new website, all that, hundreds of thousands of dollars go into it. How much time do they spend talking to customers in the real world to get the real thoughts and language and needs? Oh, maybe 6% of the budget went into that, or 1%. And by the way, oh yeah, we did customer interviews before we built our website. Oh, great. Well, who'd you talk to? I don't know. Someone has a copy of it. Well, who did the interviews? Well, it was Billy at the marketing agency. Oh, Billy, what's his background? Well, I think he got out of school last year. He's a really exciting guy. He's really eager. It's like, okay, well, you're spending money, and you're spending money to execute something that you haven't gotten the customer's perspective on. It happens. Don't do it. If you're going to build a website or turn this into action in some way, just make sure you have a way to get the client. You don't show the client the website and say, what do you think? Again, they're not supposed to be experts in you or your website. Make sure that you are aligned with their real world pain points. Let's call it the elevator rant. You can read all this here. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to work with some really cool companies that have done some really interesting things and grown, advisor, coach, support the entrepreneurial ecosystem, not the least of which is CONNECTpreneur, where I've had the privilege of working with some of you and some very cool companies. But the main thing, so that's like 45 seconds on me. But the main thing is, and I think this establishes something very unique, is, again, almost 2,400 one-on-one customer discovery conversations with B2B decision makers. And I have 2 more this afternoon, so I'll have to update this slide. But I think the point is, this gives me a unique perspective on 2 things. One is I've become sort of almost an amateur anthropologist on how customers think and talk, how they react in the wild, in the real world. And also that this is for you, that I've learned that customers will open up over the years. The questions that you ask, if you ask the right questions, and if you just sit back and listen and mute yourself, there's no limit to what they will tell you that you will find to be useful in your business. That you just have to, you have to give them a chance. You have to open the door for them again, or tear down the wall, whatever expression you want to use. So, this is very important. So of those roughly 2,400 conversations, I started to build a customer value map, if you will. So how does the customer see value from their perspective? Well, of course, they need a product or service that works, and they need to have support for that. And that's a given. But when you go farther up the value chain here, value stack, you have to do something called value add. It's this very vague thing that vendors are supposed to do or customers expect, but no one really knows what it means yet. Insights, you have to give your customers insights on how to do their jobs better. That's what this whole content marketing revolution has been about. And then innovation, of course. Does the customer trust you to give them, they want to trust you to bring them new ways to solve challenges. So that's called innovation. But the most important thing here is this horizontal line, which I see now is a little bit hard to see. It's right here. It goes right through the word, right below the word value add. Everything below this it's written down somewhere. It's obvious and explicit as to what the product is supposed to do and what the support does. The stuff above this line is unspoken. So the customers aren't going to probably come to you and say they need these things. It's up to you, the vendor, to define them. And the good news is if you define them on your terms, then it creates something that's unexpected. And that's where these elevator rants live. And this is where extraordinary companies have done a great job. Think of any great business that you do business with, even as a consumer, they're thinking ahead of you. They're leading the conversation and leading the innovation, but no one told them to do it. It's because they're curious about their customers, how those customers think and work, and what they need. So what is this thing called radically authentic customer discovery? Number one, there are three kind of attributes that I would say are not only important, but they're different from a lot of the other teachings that you'll see out there about, especially customer discovery for products, where you're basically there to validate the product that you're building. And I think we all know or should know that if you're already building it, then you have a vested interest in validating it, which means you may be biased, which means your questions may be leading questions. So instead, you start with your customer or prospect's company's challenges and priorities. So you start high. You don't start talking about your product right away. That's why we ask questions about what goes on in the boardroom meetings and things like that. Next, ask bold, disruptive, open-ended questions. One of the pieces of feedback I get on a regular basis is, wow, these questions require a little bit of courage. It's kind of bold. And I get it. It's not comfortable for everybody, especially people in customer success who I work with a lot, and who they have relationships and they work with customers every day. So it's not easy to create this new relationship or this new element in the relationship where they're able to step back and ask some bigger questions that have a somewhat bold aspect to them. Ask questions you don't know the answer to. This is one of my favorites because I think most of us do ask questions, but we ask questions in order to get the answer we want or need. And the reality is that I want you to ask questions that are going to help you advance your business in some way. So that's why you'll never hear me ask someone, what keeps you up at night? That's become a meaningless cliche, and it doesn't make the other person think at all. It's just sort of what keeps me up at night? Digital transformation and cloud. No, we need specifics. We need to get deeper than that. Once you're in a conversation, go where they take you. So don't interrupt them to solve a problem or sell something. If you have a reaction that's like, ooh, that gives me an idea that I want to bounce off them, save it. Save it till the end of the call. There's plenty of time. There's no rush. It's important for them to be able to have a space and comfort to express what's important to them. Again, in business, that should be the only thing that matters, what's important to the customer, because that's how we grow successful businesses and start successful businesses. But we don't really ask enough and get them talking enough. And then the last part is, it's not a survey. It's not something where you can just ask a series of questions. It has to be a dialogue. So you have to juice the conversation with things, asking why. Why'd you say that? What did you mean by that? How does it work? I have a client where I joined him on a very high-level strategic business development call, and the potential partner, my client mentioned safety. And the prospective partner said, oh, we really think you have a lot of value in terms of safety. And my client went on, I looked at my watch, it was literally 12 minutes talking about safety. And when he finished, the prospect said, that wasn't what I meant by safety, but that's good to know. So you have to be able to ask, like, make sure you understand what they're saying and why. So I want to try something here. I've got my chat window open. I want you guys to snap to attention and sit up. All you have to do is scan this list of 12 questions, and I want you to type in the chat box the digits of the question where your eye first stopped, or that you kind of went, whoa, I'm not sure I'm up for that one. That one's crazy. That one's dangerous. So I want to see some numbers show up in the chat. Just type in the number of the question that you think is most interesting, or, okay, great. Thank you, Sean. And while you guys are doing that, Tien, you're not supposed to respond. No, thank you. I'm just kidding. While you guys are doing that, I want to just thank Catherine for your input on this, and Consultative Sales. Absolutely. I think this is kind of an even deeper perspective on consultative sales, because this isn't selling at all. And in a consultative sales model, the other person knows you're selling something. This is different. This is a conversation to learn about them. But I love your comment. Same with Claude. He says, shut up and listen was one of the most difficult lessons I ever learned. The prospect will tell you exactly how and what to sell them if you just listen. All right. So, oh, wow. I'm scrolling down here. We've got a lot of questions. So let's go with 8. This is Shantanu. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Thank you, Shantanu. So number 8, if a competitor contacted you today, would you ignore them or want to learn more? Now, I don't know, Shantanu, what your reaction was to this question, why you picked number 8, but what I will tell you is that it makes most people that I talk to when I do training, it makes them feel uncomfortable, or it makes my client feel uncomfortable. Why do you want to talk about competitors? Why would we bring up competitors? We don't want to talk about competitors. Well, we're not. First of all, the question is not even, it's when you look at it carefully, it's not about competition. It's about your customer, and this is primarily, you would ask it to existing customers. This is to gauge their disposition. What does that mean? Well, first of all, everyone knows there's competitors. If you don't think your customer knows that there are competitors, then you really do have a wall between you and the customer. You've got to deal with reality. The reality is, not only are there competitors, they may be getting calls from your competitors. And what you want to know is, let's say you did get a call. Would you ignore it, or would you want to learn more? And what I usually do is I'll say, just give me an answer from 1 to 5. A 1 is you would completely ignore. A 5 is you would immediately get back to them and want to learn what they do and how they do it. Now, the reason I say it's not really about competition, it's about their disposition with you, is that if someone, no matter what answer they give, you start, let's say they say 5, so they want to learn more. That doesn't mean they're about to leave you. It doesn't mean they're shopping you around. What does it mean? And well, you can ask them. You'd say, oh, well, thanks for being so candid. That's a very definitive answer. 5, like you really want to learn more. Why'd you give that number? And I've never had anyone say because we're really dissatisfied and we're going to leave. It's usually something like this. They'll say, you know what? If I look at my job description and my boss and I talk about this, we need to know what else is out there just for context and benchmarks. Like we want to know if we're getting the value for what we're paying. We want to know if we're paying too much. So we're not going to go out and do rebid or look, but sometimes we have to listen. But it's not like we're cheating on you, that kind of thing. The other interesting thing is if they say 1, so in other words, if a competitor contacted them, they'd ignore it, a 1. Guess what that means? It does not mean they're staying with you. What could it mean? In my experience, it means that they might be super busy. Sometimes I'll hear them say, well, we might talk to them in a year, but right now is not a good time. Why not? Because we're doing a huge ERP transformation. We're doing this whole big shift, and this is just not the right time. So that if a 1 doesn't mean they're in love with you, but you won't know, and you can't ask. That's why you can't get this data in a survey, because there's nuance and follow-ups that you want to be able to. I defy. Maybe one day artificial intelligence would be good enough to hold these conversations after I'm long gone, but I question that. So thank you, Shantanu. Let's pick another one. Number 9, Joe Reddix. What are we great at better than anyone else? This is another one that takes a little bit of guts. Why? Well, I can tell you firsthand because I asked this question when I pivoted my consulting practice from sort of chief marketing officer for hire to chief listening officer. I did kind of my own planes, trains, and automobiles tour. People I had worked with who I thought would be candid, people who knew me, they knew my strengths and weaknesses. And I would say to them, so let me ask you, I'm sure I'm good at a bunch of stuff, good enough. Is there anything that stands out? And then I kind of held my breath, and what was interesting was I was disappointed that there were some things I thought I was really good at that they didn't mention, but I wanted to know the truth. And but the beauty of it was there was so much commonality in the answers of what my outstanding strengths were, that it almost pointed me in this direction. It kind of lit up the runway for me to decide to go down this path of, really in-depth customer discovery combined with positioning, messaging, value prop. Janice says 5 and 7. I talked about this before. 5 is the magic wand. What problem would you make disappear first? And I have to just repeat that one of my clients, I said, why are you guys so in love with this magic wand question now? And she was the director of customer success and said, I think it gives the customer permission to go outside the lines with their answer. Like it signals to them that this isn't your typical old business conversation. And she said, we're just getting amazing feedback from that. So, okay, Janice has a question or a point. Let me just scan these two, and Kristen as well. Okay, so Janice, let's talk about that at the end. Just remind me, put it in the chat again. She's saying her target audience is primarily small businesses in many different categories. How to get their time in the first place? Let's talk about that. Kristen, thank you for these insights. You're welcome. Pricing. Okay, we'll have to take that offline. That's a really long conversation. So let me keep going. And I want to talk about some techniques that go hand in hand with the questions, right? So asking the questions is great, but there's some pre, during, and post concepts or techniques that I want you to think about. This is probably my favorite and my most important because I do have such an active mind that for me, it involves taking 30 seconds before one of these customer discovery calls or any client call to get into the headspace where I'm going to be authentically curious about what I'm about to hear. And I think there's some anxiety if I start a new client engagement where I'm going to do 15 calls over a period of a week or two. The first couple calls, I'm kind of going, oh my God, I hope I get some insights. Like, what are they going to say? Do I really know enough about them to, it always works out fine. So I have to quiet down my mind, even just breathing, which I think is another one of this is going to look like Jeopardy. This whole page is going to fill up with boxes. It's not, you don't have to go do yoga. You don't have to do anything fancy. Like, don't start Googling, relaxation. It's just whatever you do. Some people listen to music, like whatever you do for a minute before these conversations. And some things that go hand in hand with that, you can't go into this with an attitude of any sort. You have to be very curious about the other person, about their business. I'm fortunate. I am very curious about different people, what they do, how they make their living, what companies do, how they fit into the broader business ecosystem, how they make money. And that's part of, that helps me. It helps me learn. But if you get on there and you're ready to challenge what everyone's saying, every time they open their mouth, you're saying, well, but we tried that and it didn't work. You might as well not do it. People can hear you smile over the phone. I know that's a funny way to say it, but there are studies that say about that. Remember to keep it all about them, at least for the first two sections of the call. I didn't mention it, but you'll see that the questions they telescope in, so they get more specific about your product. It starts with their company, then you ask about them and their role, and then down to the company and the product. So you've really done 2/3 of it is about them, and then you're getting their perspective on your product. And that goes hand in hand with start broad. Start by asking about their company at the highest levels, and then go where they want to go. There's no such thing, think about this, there's no such thing as a tangent, because if your customer is talking about it or the prospect, it may not lead directly to a sale, but it's important to them. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to tear down that wall by giving them more space to talk about what's important to them. Embrace their rants. Now, a rant does not mean, I should have clarified this earlier if I didn't. A rant doesn't mean that they're unhappy with you or your product. It doesn't mean you have to brace yourself and you're going to get yelled at. A rant could be something that they're frustrated with in another department that they're not getting support from in their company. It may be something higher up in the organization. It may be a rant about a supplier. Once in a while, you'll run across a rant that's like, oh, we can help with that. Great, save it for the end of the conversation, bring it up. If they do have a rant about your product or an individual in your company, you know what? The number one thing, you may have heard this before, people want to be heard. So you don't debate them, you don't challenge them, you don't make excuses, you empathize. It's like, you know what, that must have been, I don't know all the facts, but now that you're telling me that, it just sounds really like that was really rough for you. And I'd like to set up another call with the subject matter expert or whatever to get that ironed out. Great, no problem. 99% of the time, that's what you need to do. Agility. So we've all heard about agile techniques and processes in the software development world, in the product world. Here, the agility is, as you're going through that funnel of questions, you don't go straight down the list. You got to go, based on what they just said, I'm going to jump here. So that's agile. That's being agile. You're thinking, you're listening and thinking, and you're thinking, well, in this next question, they kind of already answered that, so I'm going to skip it. And sometimes I'll say to them, wow, your last answer was so complete. You just answered 2 questions I don't even need to ask anymore. They get a chuckle out of that. Converse with them. Again, use the little words, why, how, what, to get them to talk more. And the 2 golden rules here, no selling and no solving. Again, if anything comes up that's sort of like a big issue or an opportunity, try and save it till the end of the call and just say, you know what, I couldn't help but notice you mentioned that you're having the challenge over here. We actually have a module or a feature or a service, or I have a company that I work with that's helped us with that same issue, and I would love to help with that. Whatever your style is, but you can hear that it's a very conversational style. No solving and no selling means you're really going to be able to focus on what they're saying. You just set it aside, and they'll appreciate it, by the way. Okay, just how do you know this is working? Here are some of the signals that I get that tell me that people are really opening up. In addition to what they're actually saying, they might say, well, why is that important? Well, it's because they're being thoughtful about what they're about to say. I made their brain work a little bit. I disrupted their thought processes in a good way. Sometimes they'll say, that's a great question. And you'll hear me on clips, I'll almost always say, well, thank you. Because that's like my whole living is asking good questions. When they say this, no one's ever asked me that before. That's great, because I know I'm going to get an insight that no one else has the privilege to hear if they haven't been asked that question before. And I think that people also appreciate being asked in a way that's different and clever. And that reflects on your personal brand and your company's brand. When people were in the office all the time, sometimes someone would say, hang on, let me close my door. And I would always get a chuckle. Not that they're going to, give me all kinds of gossip that I don't care about. Mostly because that is the feeling I want to imagine that they're very relaxed, that they maybe even have their feet up, and that they're not worried about looking at someone. That's why I don't do these on video. I just always audio. I don't need to see their body language. I don't want them to be distracted with, my backdrop or whatever. I want them to feel like they're in a confessional, basically. And then the last one is very telling. Like in the 28th or 9th minute of a 30-minute call, I'll say, look, I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have time for one more question? They go, oh yeah, no problem. This is good. And this is important. So I can go till 40 minutes or 45 minutes. They're telling me it's important. Now they're telling me it's important. And that happens a lot. All these reactions occur frequently, and it tells you that it is working. So I think we have time for this. I'm going to play a brief clip of an actual live customer call. It's very brief, and then I'm just going to talk about a couple things that I learned from it.
What's the hardest part of your job or the biggest challenge that you face on a regular basis?
Yeah.
I forgot to add. This is the vice principal of a public high school in a rather urban part of New Jersey. I don't remember which city. He is a user of my client's software. My client's software is a platform that helps schools with administrative things like attendance. It's basically the student information system. So it's got it's like the CRM for the school, but it also helps with training and security, and it tracks everything. Sorry about that.
Put a lot of thought into this, actually, because interacting with students that aren't motivated with education is really difficult, and something you're dealing with pretty much every day. It's difficult for me to make them see what the future will be without education. So it's really hard to change their mind. They give up sometimes because they don't see education taking them where they need to go. They, for example, have part-time jobs and they think it's pretty good money, but they can't really see beyond that. There's no foresight. And I try to tell them that the goal should be having a good paying full-time job. But again, it's pretty frustrating, hard to get them to see that value.
So there's a couple important things I want you to know. Super, super important. So someone might say, well, who cares? I don't care about this guy's, what his problems are. No. We need to have a more holistic understanding of our customers. So there's some indirect insight here. The indirect insight is, in case you couldn't tell, this guy is super passionate about his job, and he cares about the students to the extent that when I asked him, what's the hardest part of your job? He didn't say, oh, it's this module in the software. He could have, but I wanted him to answer holistically, what's the hardest part of your whole job? What he's telling you is the software is a tiny part of his job. It's almost like an afterthought. Like, that's not a big deal. Now, the other part of it is I felt his passion about his mission of these students that it's hard to get them to understand the value of getting an education, and envisioning, it really touched me, envisioning what their life will be like without a full high school and maybe college education. So what does this mean to my client, who is a software company? Here's what I would say. When someone has that level of passion and commitment, and their day job is challenging to that extent, and you can only imagine this guy's dealing with students, with parents, with teachers, with his peers. The software better damn well be easy to use, because he does not have time to hunt around for videos that explain this or that. The software better make his life easier rather than harder. And unfortunately, in some cases, that's not always the case. So I actually have more stuff to talk about, but I want to just let you know that Churn Zero, which is a terrific software company, software as a service for customer success teams, published actually a really good summary of all my entire technique. And all you have to do is go to Churn Zero and look in their resources section. Here's the link, and you could also use this QR code to get there. So now, if you have any questions, I think we're really close to the end, but I want to go back to Janice in the meantime, if anyone else has a question. Janice says, how do I get their time in the first place to ask these questions? I have an email template. I didn't put it in this presentation, but it basically says, in order for us to be a great company, and Janice, I'm referring to your company, in order for us to be a great company and continue to be successful, we have to constantly understand what's going on in our customers' worlds when we're not around. Like what's important to them. Would it be possible to have a 30-minute call to just talk about those things? It's not a pitch. There's no other agenda. Now, the thing is, it has to be authentic. You can't get in there and start pitching. That email, when it comes from an authentic place, it gets a very high conversion rate. It almost ends up feeling like a research call. Almost ends up being like a research call. So I hope that helps. If you want to message me on LinkedIn afterwards, I can provide the email template. Happy to provide that. Or maybe Skylar, you and I can figure out a way to get it to everybody. Skylar, do you have any questions? I think Tien had to drop off, but is there anything else? I want to be really respectful of time. Oh, you're there.
Yep.
All right. Here we got one. I like the example of empathizing with the principal and switching gears in a demo setting. How do you engage with time-crunched customers who want to dive into the product without answering many questions? So again, I'm not big on saying to the customer who says they're busy, like, well, this will help us give you the best possible demo. Like, okay, if they don't believe it's helpful to them, again, try to separate the conversations, that there's a separate discovery call. And if they want to go into the demo, that's okay. But you sometimes, and it depends on how much sort of boldness you're capable of, is to say, we'll do the demo, but we'd really like to agree that at the end of the demo, we're going to have 15 minutes of Q&A, that we can ask you some questions, or we can have a separate call, your choice. And that's super important. Is to try and not so much convince them that it's worth their time, and by the way, sometimes people are just, the word isn't rude, but they just can't see past their own schedule, and it's not going to work. But I totally feel your pain. Thank you, Joseph. Yes, I look forward to part 2 as well next Tuesday. So again, that'll be how to take what you're hearing and use it to come up with a great positioning and messaging strategy that's effective in the marketplace. There's a bunch more messages. Oh, these are thank you. Okay, Sean, I think we're almost out of time, but why don't we catch up, because you're asking a really good, juicy question that I really want to answer. Fair enough?
Yeah, Bob, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. All right, Tien and Skylar, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bob, and thank you guys for participating. We'll make sure that when we follow up with each of you, Skylar will include copy Bob so that you can directly email Bob if you'd like. This has been really informative. I mean, I love the cheat sheet thing. I can't wait to look at that. And I have so many other questions for you, Bob, but we'll have to take it offline. Like some of the things I have were like, when you're asking me questions, what if you have a reticent sales prospect? Are they going to give you the time of day? When you're asking them the questions, how can you demonstrate expertise? Is there a way to ask a particular question that implies that you're knowledgeable about the space? How do you build credibility and trust while asking these questions?
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of that is personality related, right? And feeling the person out, I guess.
Yeah, but I think there's a fundamental thing here. This is a new kind of conversation. This isn't a sales call.
Right.
It's not a customer success quarterly business review. It really is a separate conversation, or you can take some of these questions out and you can work them into other meetings. But it's good to preface them by saying, look, we've covered a lot of stuff. We have 5 minutes left. Do you mind if we take a step back? Because we have some questions we love to ask our customers that really helps us understand them at a deeper level. It's not a pitch. It's not a salesy thing. I mean, if you come at it as, well, we only want to focus on selling them something at the end of the day, that just doesn't leave as much time and energy for listening and learning. So that'd be my comment. It's easy for me to say. I'm not a quota. I'm not carrying a definitive quota, but I think it will help everyone. And I think that you look at the percentage of talk time for those successful sales reps, they talk a lot less than their peers who are performing not as well. So you just got to figure out a way to get them talking.
Yeah. One final thought or question for you is, there's 3 modalities, right? You can do it on the phone, do it on Zoom, or do it in person. Do you have any data on the efficacy of each of those modalities relative to, like if I meet with you one-on-one and have a great half an hour conversation with these difficult questions, are my chances of closing a deal down the road higher?
That's a good question. I noticed that you. I noticed that you. Yeah, I noticed that you're very sales focused.
Maybe I shouldn't be.
No. Well, I think it worked. I think whatever works for you. So I don't have data. My own personal experience, though, is that I think Zoom is not only overused, but there has to be a value in the Zoom for the customer. It can't just be because you want to see them and they're paying attention. You gotta trust that the customer is in it for all the right reasons, that they believe this is going to be good for them too. So I use phone, audio only. I don't have to worry about body language, or because I'm hunched over taking notes. It's not good body language anyway. They can see me as well as I can see them. Phone is great. They feel protected. They feel, again, like it's a confessional. In person is a whole different story. I think it could be good, but then just think about what that's like for the customer. They're sitting there going, what's my 2:00? Oh my God, Bob London's coming in. Who is that again? And then do I have to validate his parking? And then when I get there, he might be like, he's wearing a jacket. Like, what is this guy really like out of fashion? Why is he wearing a sport jacket? Like, those are all distractions and atmospherics that we don't want to or need to deal with. So I would say stick with voice. They'll be relieved that it's not a Zoom call. That's my position. Fair enough?
Good advice. Thank you so much. Well, with that, I want to thank everybody for joining. Bob, virtual claps, man. Thank you. This is one of our best master classes, I can say. Really, I learned a lot. I took a whole bunch of notes. So thank you for sharing. And hopefully you guys can join us next Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Skylar will put the link on her follow-up emails. And again, save up your questions and really appreciate your guys' interaction. And once again, Bob, thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was a great group. A lot of challenging, good questions, good insights. Thank you.
Super topic, really. Thank you guys so much.